hello, welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Chloe, and on this channel we talk about all things books. So it is the end of August, start of September. Well, it's actually the 6th of September, so we're already almost a weekend. However, today's video, as you probably guessed by the title, is my August wrap-up, and I had what I am willing to bet is my best reading month ever in August. I managed to get through 15 books, which I don't think I've ever done before. Only 3 of them were audiobooks as well, which makes it even more impressive, if I do say so myself. That is by no means normal. I just had a lot more free time this month than what I would normally have, and with the weather being so crap at the start of the month, I wasn't really going out much, so yeah, I got a lot of reading done. Plus, a lot of the books that I read were pretty short, but no matter, 15 books is still impressive. So I thought I would show you them, talk a little bit about them, and share all of my non-spoilery thoughts. So the first books that I want to talk about are the Bellinger Sisters duology by Tessa Bailey. I listened to these on audio, and they are It Happened One Summer and Hook, Line and Sinker. Now, for those of you who don't know, these follow the Bellinger sisters, obviously. The first book is It Happened One Summer, and you don't necessarily have to read them in order. They are standalones, but I would recommend doing it because the first one sort of sets up the story for the second one. So right at the start of It Happened One Summer, Piper, the oldest sister, who, now I should probably say that the girls had been brought up by their stepdad and mum, stepdad being like a multi-millionaire or billionaire, whichever. So they're living the life of Riley, living their life. And at the start of the first book, Piper does something to piss off her stepdad, and as punishment she gets sent to a small fishing village where their biological dad is from, to sort of learn some responsibility and learn not to take things for granted so much, I guess. So in solidarity, her younger sister Hannah goes with her, and whilst they're there, they learn that their dad, who's since passed, owned a pub and it's kind of fallen into disrepair, and they start to renovate the pub. And then it's just really all about her life living in this small fishing village. She meets the male main character, Brendan, and that sort of then spirals into their love story. It was good, I enjoyed it. I think I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. I think I would probably class it as small town romance, definitely Grumpy Sunshine, which I love. It was pretty bog standard in terms of romance books. There wasn't really an awful lot to say, but it was enjoyable. Hook, Line and Sinker then follows Hannah, the younger sister, and the love interest in this book is Fox, who is one of Brendan's colleagues. They're both fishermen, and they sort of start as friends, and it kind of spirals into a little bit more, but Hannah is in love with someone else, and it's a sort of will they won't they. I didn't like that one quite as much as I liked It Happened One Summer, but again I ended up giving it 3 stars because I think it's a pretty solid romance. It's pretty bog standard, and it was a good introduction to Tessa Bailey, although I have to say I have read that her other books aren't that great, so I'm not too sure how many of them I'll pick up. But I'm glad that I read those, or at least listened to those ones anyway. Alright, next up I read This Woven Kingdom by Tahara Mafi, and then I listened to These Infinite Threads on audiobook for no other reason other than I only own this, and if I was going to buy the second one I would want it to be in the Illumicrate version to match, but that's really expensive so I didn't do that, and instead I checked out the audiobook from the library. Okay, there's not an awful lot that actually happens in these books. I gave the first one 3.5 stars, I think, and then I think I might have given the second one 4 stars. There's not a great deal in terms of plot, especially in the second one, but it was an enjoyable read anyway. So the first book follows Eliza, who is kind of like a lost Jinn queen, and she lives her life as a servant to avoid detection from the crown. Now the crown prince, Kamran, has heard prophecies that describe the Jinn queen facilitating the death of his grandfather, the king, and obviously it has then been the crown's mission to find this queen and kill her. But of course he meets Eliza, and it's a very sort of insta-lovey situation. They sort of fall for each other, and thus is the story. I don't want to say too much about these infinite threads, obviously, because it's a sequel, so spoilers. But there was little to no plot in that book at all. It definitely fell victim to second book syndrome. It was just straight vibes. There was just not a whole lot happening, but it was still somehow enjoyable. Again, this was my first Tahara Mafi books. I haven't read the Shatter Me series yet, but I really, really enjoyed how she wrote her characters, how she built the world. Her storytelling feels very whimsical. It's very much like a fairy tale, and I don't know if that's the same for the Shatter Me series or if it's just this one in particular, but I did really like this. I am looking forward to the third one coming out. I'm definitely going to read it. I do hope that some more actually happens, because at the minute the story for this one feels a little bit flimsy, but we'll see. Given how much everybody loves Shatter Me though, I'm kind of hoping that that's just how it is, and it's kind of like an avalanche and it will eventually gain a little bit of momentum for the last book, but we'll see. Next up, I read the Heartstopper series by Alice Osman. Now, this is a graphic novel series. There are 4 volumes out currently, and the 5th one comes out in November this year, I think. So I finally got round to reading it in preparation for season 2 of the TV show that came out at the start of August, I think it was. I haven't watched it. I've watched season 1, but not season 2. This is so cute. This is such a feel-good series, but at the same time it also tackles some quite difficult topics, but in a really sensitive, well done way. And yeah, I loved it. I think that the sort of love story unfolding between our two main characters, Nick and Charlie, is just so cute, and I really can't wait to get to the next one. I read all 4 of these within a couple of days. It was highly recommend. Next up, I read Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Now, I really wanted to read this before the movie came out on Amazon, and it was okay. I kind of struggled towards the 200-300 page mark. Now, for those of you who watched my wrap up at the end of July will know that I started One Last Stop. And the same thing happened to me with that book. I got stuck at 200 pages and then ended up just putting it down. I really wanted to like this one, but it was just a bit, you know. And then I finally made my way through it. I tried to watch the film, and I think I got maybe about 10 minutes into that and switched it off. It just wasn't that good. But anyway, so this book follows the first son, Alex, who is the son of the President of the United States, and a English prince, Prince Henry. And basically they are rivals, they are enemies at the start of the book, they don't like each other, and then something happens, and as a PR sort of save face exercise, they have to pretend to be friends, which then turns into a real friendship, which then snowballs into a romantic relationship. And it's all about them trying to navigate that relationship whilst not making it public, because obviously that would be a huge international relations deal. And it's just about, it was nice. I liked the romance in it. It was, you know, they were decent enough characters. Prince Henry was a little bit dull, but I just don't think that Casey McQuiston's writing is for me. I think, given that it's happened twice now, I feel like our books are just too long. There's a lot of unnecessary information. This one was very political as well, almost to the point of it just being a little bit too idealistic, a little bit unrealistic. So I don't know, there was a lot in there that I just didn't feel had to be. But the romance itself was quite cute. Then I did end up finishing One Last Stop by the same author. This book took me so long to read, and I really had to force my way through the last 150 or so pages of it because it was just such a drag. And again, it was the exact same thing. I feel like there was so much unnecessary information. So basically this is a sapphic romance. It follows our main character August, who moves to New York, and she, when taking the subway to, I think it's work or maybe university, I can't remember if she's going to work or uni, but she takes the subway one day and she meets a girl on the subway. It's a brief encounter, but it's kind of like a love at first sight, or at least infatuation at first sight sort of thing, and they get talking, and eventually she realises that Jane, the girl on the train, is stuck in time and is actually from the 1970s. So they have to try and unravel Jane's life. They have to try and figure out the events that led to her being stuck on the train, and then how to get her back. But of course they fall for each other, and it's all about them trying to navigate that relationship whilst also trying to do what's best and send her back. To be honest, it wasn't for me. It just was not for me. The main characters, August and Jane, were really dull, in my opinion. Any one of the side characters would have been a much better POV to read from, because they were so colourful, so animated, and just so interesting, that these two just kind of felt a little bit flat for me. There's also a little bit of a murder mystery going on alongside of it as well. So August's mum is trying to figure out what happened to her brother who went missing in the 70s, and it's just one of those things that's kind of mentioned and then falls into the background, and it's not mentioned again right until the end. It was bizarre. It's not for me. I think I have to finally admit to myself that Casey McQuiston's writing is not for me. I mean, it's a shame because people seem to really love their books, but I tried and I didn't like them. I gave it two chances to like the books, but no, not for me. The next couple of books I read during my 24-hour readathon, so for anybody who has watched that, you'll have already seen these, so I won't dive into too much detail on them. First up, I have Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. Now, I'm sure everybody knows what Ali Hazelwood's books are about by now, but this one follows our main character Elsie, who is a woman in STEM. She is a physicist, and she is trying to get a job at MIT when she meets her kind of, I don't know if it's not really a workplace rival because she doesn't work there, but she is a theoretical physicist, but she meets Jack, who is an experimental physicist, and the two kind of clash. The two disciplines don't really get along, and so that's sort of, it's kind of like an enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers sort of vibe going on, but obviously they end up together. The cover sort of spoils you a little bit, but yeah, again, it's very much what you would expect from an Ali Hazelwood book. I liked it. It's good. It's basically just the love hypothesis, but with different characters. But I ended up giving it 3 stars anyway, and if you like Ali Hazelwood's writing, I think you will definitely enjoy this one. Next up, I have Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, and again, it's a very bog standard sort of romance novel. It's dual timeline, which I really enjoy, but this follows our main characters Percy and Sam, who met when they were kids, when Percy's family bought a holiday home next to Sam's house, and it kind of shows you the every summer they had up to when they fell out and stopped speaking, whilst at the same time playing out the present day's events where Percy has to go back to that town for a funeral. and I definitely enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. It was a very quick read as well. It's only just under 300 pages, so it was super, super quick to get through. It was the first Carly Fortune book that ever. There was a lot of first-time authors in this month, I feel like, but yeah, it was my first Carly Fortune book, and I really enjoyed it. So I'll definitely be picking up some more of her books in future. Okay, then we have Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I've said it a million times. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love her writing. I love everything that she puts out. I gave this 5 stars. It comes as no surprise to anyone, but basically this follows Carrie Soto, who is a champion tennis player. She's considered the greatest female tennis player pretty much of all time. She has retired, but there is a young tennis player who is about to beat her slam record, so she comes out of retirement in order to defend her title. Now, we first meet Carrie Soto in Malibu Rising, and you don't have to read that book to read this. However, I'm glad that I did read it first, because it was nice to see Carrie Soto as a side character, almost like a villain in that story, but then be able to read from her point of view in her own novel and really see how much depth the character actually has. It was just so interesting diving into the world of tennis, which I know very little about, but I was so hooked throughout this book. It felt as if I was actually watching the events of the novel unfold, and I think this is definitely my favourite Taylor Jenkins Reid book so far. Alright, now we have The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This was okay. It was certainly a different take on romance. So this follows Florence, who is a ghostwriter for a very famous romance novelist, and she can see ghosts. She's always had that ability. She's been able to do it since she was young. So can her dad, who her family, by the way, run a funeral home. So that whole situation must have been fun for someone that can see ghosts. But anyway, so she is needing a deadline, and her editor calls her in to basically say, you have to hand in the book tomorrow. But she is called home because of a tragedy, and while she's there talking to her family, the doorbell rings, she opens it, and there is her editor Benji in ghost form. So Benji died, she can see him, and they have to try and figure out why he's come to her and how Florence can help him move on. But of course, it's a romance book, so they fall in love, and then they have to try and navigate the fact that Benji is dead, and you can't date your dead ghost editor. So yeah, it's a slightly different take on it. It was okay. It dragged for the first part of the book. The ending was quite good. They refer to coffee multiple times as Zoom Zoom juice though, and I could not look past that. I couldn't give it any more than 3 stars for that reason. But it was enjoyable enough. So if you haven't read it, I think I would definitely recommend reading it, especially if you are an avid romance reader. If you do like contemporary books, then definitely pick it up because it was fun. I just don't think that I enjoyed it as much as I could have, because romance it's not really my thing. It kind of almost gives like sort of, not spooky vibes, but it's quite an eerie setting, obviously with the funeral home, and there's a few scenes where they're in a cemetery. I think it would be a good, if you want a romance book that's quite light, but for spooky season, like a cozy autumn vibe, I think this would be a good one. Alright, last up we have The Roughest Draft by Emily Weberly and Austin Sigmund Broca. I'm really sorry if I butchered that name, but that's what we're going with. So this follows 2 co-authors called Katrina and Nathan, who wrote 2 novels together. Their most recent one was a global sensation, but they fell out and haven't spoken to each other since, and they have to come together to write the 3rd and final book in their contract, much to their dismay. So after much persuasion, they meet back up together and just want to get through this book, try and get it done and get it out of the way so that they never have to speak to each other again. But this is also a little bit of a dual timeline because you're sort of getting flashbacks to when they were writing their 1st and 2nd novels together, and the friendship that they had, and then the events that led up to them falling out and not speaking to each other. And then it sort of flicks back to present day where they're trying to work through all of those feelings. It's the main characters for me came across as a little bit pretentious. They kind of had an air of I'm better than you, you know, and I don't know why, they just felt very cold and closed off. I didn't really connect with any of them, and I think because of that I didn't enjoy the story as much as I wanted to, because this was a really anticipated book for me. I was really looking forward to getting to this one, but it just, it was alright. I feel like I've said that for most of them. It was okay, or it was just okay. But it wasn't anything special. However, that being said, I love reading books about books or about authors or anything to do with publishing. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. The romance was a bit, I don't know, they didn't seem to have an awful lot of chemistry, in my opinion. And maybe that was just because of how cold they were towards one another for the majority of the book, but I wouldn't have put them together. I think they actually worked better as friends, and it almost would have been nicer to see them rekindle a friendship and have a platonic relationship, I think, in my opinion. But then that's also not the point of a romance novel, so what do I know? But yeah, I don't know, it was just unbelievable that these two people who seem very different would end up together, in my opinion. I just saw a moth come in, and that is my cue to wrap up. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. That was my August wrap up. Let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of the books that I mentioned and what you thought about them. Please consider giving this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hitting that subscribe button if you want to hear more of my bookish ramblings. See you in the next one. Bye!